everybody, welcome back to Bug Proletariat 40K. So it's finally the week of the battle to end Alzheimer's at Tables and Towers in Westminster, Maryland. Lists were due earlier this week on Monday, and I submitted my Pauper Princess list. I wrote an article about it over on Frontline Gaming about how I feel like the list will do, hopefully, and how, the meta's in a rough place right now with all the Tau craziness with their firepower, with Eldar like Indirect, which really hurts our army more than a lot of other armies out there, and like with the Harlequins having almost an 80% win rate. It's going to be a tough event. I think it reached 100 players. I'm the only GSC player there, so we'll see what happens. But a lot of really good players. The meta's really tough on the East Coast here. A lot of really good players are coming from all over to play in it since it's such a big event. And I think the breakdown, I have it in my thing, but it's a bunch of Tau players, Custodes, Harlequins, and Eldar, and Mixed Eldar. One Imperial Fist player, that guy's an absolute champion, and one GSC player, which is me, and a little mix of some of the other factions in between. So the takeaway is really, and I knew this going into the event, you're not, especially now, with the way the meta is, you're not going to avoid Tau, you're not going to avoid Custodes, you're not going to avoid Harlequins or Eldar. It's just too many factions that make up such a significant chunk of tournaments right now. I mean, if you're in a smaller meta or you're running smaller RTTs and that's not what people play, then you can kind of gauge your army around that. But for here, I mean, our RTT in February was 50 players. So it's really a better representation of the meta overall of Tournament 40K. So I wrote this list in mind with knowing if I want to do well, and I consider if I go 3-2, I'll be happy. I'm going to have to play and beat a Tau, Custodes, Harlequins. I mean, that's going to be tough. I actually haven't even played the new Harlequins codex yet, but they look gross. So I crunched some of the numbers and I did the math, and it looks like, to me, Pauper Princess with a 5-up Invuln Relic and mixed with a Biophagus just gives you the best chance to survive that indirect fire from broadsides, from night spinners, some of the fire that when you go out to hold objectives that necessarily aren't always going to be in terrain. You can survive some of that crisis unit fire. This event is using player place, which I think is going to be really big on how I can protect some of the objectives and put some obscuring around it. I've practiced a few games with player place, and actually it helps you keep the GSC models on the table way longer. Tables and Towers have never had any issues as far as terrain. There's always been plenty. I mean, you guys can see from some of my previous video pictures, there's usually those 4 giant ruins. But with player place now, for example, that big 3-story building that are in some of my pictures, that can get placed right outside of the objective token, or just so I can sit inside of there with windows closed and know that nothing can shoot me. If something wants to come over and hold the objective, I can heroic into it with Focus of Adoration, unless they go on the very tip of the objective, and they're not going to be able to pile that many models on like I can. So that's been a big help for me in holding primary, which I'll hope to leverage with Aberrants, as well as Neophytes sitting behind them with a 5-up Invuln and 5++. Ignore wound save. Forgot. It's 3 pluses for ignore wound saves. So we'll see how it goes. And along with Biophagus 5-up ignore wounds, which is on one of my blocks of Neophytes, as well as I'm just going to hope to roll the 5 or 6 for the second block. They actually can reduce damage a lot. I put together a little slide to show some of the numbers of how it compares to Bladed Cog, and as well as how it compares to just a regular, like if you would take a Myriad Call, which they really don't have any defensive buffs, what that Pauper Prince's defensive capabilities are actually giving you. So as you can see here, the math, there's a ton of Tau players there, and they all have some form of, some lists have 9 broadsides, some just have 3 or 6, but all of them have some form of broadsides with SMS guns. So I definitely wanted to see how many of my Neophytes, because that's what's going to be out holding objectives as my other army tries to get my enemy's lines and disrupt their primary, how many neophytes is that going to kill if they're hiding in my terrain that hopefully I've placed well through player placed terrain? So when I looked at Bladed Cog with a 6-up invuln on everything, which is nice because you don't have to stay in that bubble from the Primus, it's with the SMS shots, 24 shots for the 3 broadsides. This doesn't include any buffs or anything with, like, if you have, what's her face? The Chapter Master that can get rerolls, or any of the Monka or anything like that. This is just straight broadside shooting at neophytes with a 6-up invuln. 72% of the time they're killing 8 of them, and more than half of the time it's going to kill 9. That's a ton, obviously. Almost half the unit. Now, if they have the 5-up Feel No Pain, it's still 6 more than half the time. And with Brute Search, because it's a damage 1 weapon, you're just going down to more than half the time, just killing 5. So 1 unit shooting at neophytes, you know, if they're fully buffed with a Brute Search, killing 5 of them is probably not going to feel bad, especially if you have the Icon. So Bladed Cog is really not that bad. It's very defensive, and you get the bonus of having those Aberrants, which you're definitely going to tech around the 5-up invuln Aberrants with the Field No Pains from the Biophagus, who are really, really durable. You know, the most durable thing are Codex. No argument, absolutely. But unfortunately, those Aberrants are very expensive. I have one unit of them in my list of the Pauper Princes, and without the 5-up invuln, they've still been pretty durable for me. They'll fold under if, you know, Tau Crisis suits, Plasma shoots into them or anything like that. But a lot of the damage 1 weapons, especially with the 2 CP, for the higher strength guns out there, to make them only win on 4s, it still only kills 1, 2, 3. I mean, I've had Guard Manicore shooting them without the 5-up invuln, and it still just kills a couple, 1, 2, 3 at the most. When we look at the Pauper Princes, you can see just with that 5-up invuln, which they're going to get from being within 9 of my Primus, they get a 60% chance to kill 7 of them. And then with the Feel No Pain, it's just above 50% killing 5. So you could do a little worse, could do a little better. You know, this is a dice game. So I just feel like that 5-up invuln is helping overall more with my core OBSEC units that I really need to keep alive to hold objectives on the table. Aberrants are definitely tougher. They're definitely more, you know, going to kill stuff in close combat, but they're not OBSEC, which I think is a huge downside, because all a Tau player, a Custodes player needs to do is tag an objective with OBSEC, and they can just get in a fight with the Aberrants. And, you know, Aberrants smash Custodes for sure, but with all the buffs that Custodes has, Transhuman, turning off any rerolls that you could give them through an Abominant, you can make them -1 attack when you switch to Shadow Keepers. It's looking less and less likely that those Aberrants are going to kill a unit of Custodes, and just one needs to survive if those are the only things on that objective. And now you could put the Aberrants on the objective and make sure you have Neophytes on there as well. But if the Aberrants are out in my opponent's lines killing things, the Neophytes kind of don't want to be up there. They're really easy to kill, and a lot of armies can just kill the Neophytes easily and then deal with the Aberrants a different way. Maybe just leave them there and still hold the objective. So you can see 20 regular Neophytes is real bad. Almost 60% to kill 9. So just 3 broadsides, just their SMS guns, killing half of your unit. So I made a Myriad's cult list. I just feel like it's way too easy for the armies in the meta right now to chew through that stuff. Another issue, I played a Eldar player in one of my practice games, and he took a couple of Night Spinners. I don't know actually how many Night Spinners exactly are going to be at the tournament, but this is a good example of some indirect fire that's, higher strength, AP2, and 2 damage. So, different from the 1 damage that would be coming in. So this could kind of cover, guard indirect kind of stuff, Night Spinners, any of the other Eldar indirect, which is definitely a list out there, just indirect spam. So if you look at the Pauper Princes with the 5-up invuln alone, just 56% they're killing 5. Now here they're killing 5 because they're getting max shots of 12 through the blast rule. But again, they're only going to have 3 of these, so if they shoot all 3 of them at one neophyte squad is still not killing them, and hopefully these neophytes are inside a cover obscuring, they can't be seen, and some can come back with the icon. That's exactly actually what happened in my practice game. My opponent was shooting night spinners throughout the entire game at my 40 neophytes, and the neophytes in that game actually didn't even have the 5-up Feel No Pain, which, as you can see, it goes down significantly how much they kill when they get that 5-up Feel No Pain. And both squads, my 20 neophytes, lasted the entire game through, I believe it was 6 of the indirect platforms and 2 night spinner firing into him, just to he was trying to clear me off the objectives. Now, when you go over to Bladed Cog, just with the 6-up invuln, you can see 63%, you're already killing 6. So you have a higher percentage to kill more right off the bat. Then it goes down, half the time you're going to kill 6. Anyway, even with the 5-up feeling. So that's kind of the math behind of my reasoning for taking the Pauper Prince's neophyte blobs there in the list, and not teching more towards the Bladed Cog aberrants, just because they're OBSEC. They'll stick around longer as long as you hide them, obviously. If you throw them out where they can be seen by everything, and it's not going to be good. But just by taking those 2 blobs, it also opens up allowing me to take a unit of aberrants that is still tough, that just needs to, stay hidden until it can pop out from terrain. Again, using that big ruin with windows closed through player place is huge, and not all tournaments are going to have that. But I know that that's a spot where they can live, where if anything comes in and wants to charge them, they'll probably be okay. There's not too many things that can just wipe 10 aberrants away. And then with advance and charge, they can come out or just move on to a middle objective and use transhuman, or throw neophytes in front of them and not be targeted. There's plenty of options to keep them alive so they can punch something the next turn. It also lets me, by taking just the 1 unit of aberrants and some cheaper OBSEC units, it lets me bring in 30 Genestealers. I know a lot of people, every time I post lists, any kind of Pauper Prince's list with Genestealers, people are like, why? Like, you don't get anything. You don't get the 5-up invuln, you don't get the +1 to hit because they're to hit on 2s. I just feel like for 140 points, the Genestealers that can advance and charge, have a 4-up invulnerable save, are just so fast. And, obviously the 1 unit that can move before the game. So fast and just such a threat to so many units in the game right now that 30 of them is just going to be overwhelming amount of attacks for most opponents. Unit of 10 definitely does not kill. It kills actually like a Custodes bike if you roll well. So throwing them into things like that is not great because they're only strength 4. But things like Harlequins, if they move right up next to them, because you got to take into account the Harlequins can move 6 inches away, you're going to get a ton of attacks with +1 to hit, so lightning fast doesn't do anything. This goes for Eldar as well. And then you're not really relying on any rerolls that can be turned off. You don't care about transhuman, you're only strength 4. You just have a ton of attacks at high AP that you're hoping go through, and making those Harlequins, making those Custodes, roll those 4+ saves. And my unit's 140 points, and yours is not, and I have 3 of them, and, well, with Harlequins you do, but with Custodes you do not. So I'm hoping that's how that plays out. I could be completely wrong. We'll see. Again, it is a unit with a 4-up invulnerable save. If you get hot on the 4-ups, it can help out a lot. Or, as I've done plenty of times, and I'm sure other people who played Genestealer have done in the past, you can just whiff a bunch of 4-ups, and you've got 2 little Genestealers left, and they're not going to do a darn thing. So we'll see how bringing 30 does. There's no argument that 30 of them does more close combat damage and is faster in Twisted Helix. It just, the rest of your army is Twisted Helix, kind of suffers from not having any defensive buffs other than the mini transhuman, which only helps against strength 8 things for acolytes and Genestealers and things like that. So it's not a huge buff, especially with all of the Eldar strength 6 shooting out there now. That just has a massive amount of shots and 1 damage. So the list will be below in the comments if you want to take a look at the full list. This is kind of an overview of how I see it going. The list is very much based around on I'm going to stay alive and score my primary and secondary and take away my opponent's primary through lying in wait, through using excavate to slow them down, on a piece of terrain that they think they can hide in and pop out to maybe a middle objective or midfield objective somewhere, as well as having those 3 units of acolytes to perform my secondaries, be it deploy teleport homers, rod, or R&D now. And then as well as a psychic secondary, because I have a Magus and a Patriarch. I feel like it can score well the list, even as I'm losing a ton of models from the crazy amount of offensive output of Tau, and whether the defensive Custodes and their offensive output, as well as the craziness of Harlequins, although I haven't played Harlequins yet, so we'll see. And come back here next week to check out the overview of some of the games. I'll definitely have pictures and a write-up on Frontline Gaming, but a full breakdown of every game here on the Bug Proletariat 40K. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good weekend, and hope you win some games this weekend.